you could speak both languages, like understand the clinical side, understand the IT side, and kind of bring them together. Being at that nexus is both being an informatician and also being a startup founder.
Efficiency Unlocked is hosted by two tech-savvy physicians and dear friends of mine, Drs. Carewe and Dale Gold, who are experts in using technology to automate routine tasks and increase efficiency in everyday and business life. Let's see what they have for us today.
Yeah, you've probably heard a lot about companies that are building a digital front door for patients. Like, oh, I can access whatever I need as a patient, but we're really building a digital front door for clinicians.
That was our guest this week, Dr. Yair Saperstein. He's the CEO and co-founder of Avo MD, also a board-certified physician and clinical informatician.
One of my passions is speaking to clinicians who are stuck in clinical care and they want to be able to get out. And I can help in two ways. One is, look, the software that I'm building, it's one passion. This will help. Okay. The second is, if you want to come and join and actually help us as we're improving the system overall, use your knowledge, do it, take advantage of it. I will help you. I'll help you get other resources to be able to do it. This is what we need to do. Take all the things that we know, take the problems that we're aware of, take our deep understanding of workflows. We get it. And as clinicians, let's actually build the things that we need.
So we'll get into more details here in a moment, but Avo essentially is a no-code clinical decision support platform that brings evidence directly into the workflow of clinicians, something we all want. And before we get started today, I need to make sure I disclose something. Because Avo was solving for such an important problem that I saw in healthcare, I made the personal decision to invest some of my personal money directly into an Avo Safe round. I just want to make sure that's clear before this airs so people are aware. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for this series of episodes where we'll be discussing the game-changing impact of AI in the realm of patient care and physician well-being.
Get ready to unlock efficiency with NerdMDs.
Efficiency Unlocked. Welcome to this week's episode. I am joined here today with Dale and our guest, which you just heard an intro for and a few sound bites, but Dale, I want you to go back to when you were a med student. Can you remind us again when that was, just so people can put a date to? He's got to look at his.
Graduated in 2011.
Okay, so that's right. You were 2 years behind me. All right, so
it was the late 2000s.
Yeah. So I want you to think back to what you had to do for the resources you had to carry around, the things that helped you as a student. I remember my pockets being full and I hated that white coat when it was that way, but what do you remember, Dale?
Yeah, no, white coat, full of little books, each rotation, different little book, weighting down my shoulders. I know that you and I are both into inventing the next comfortable white coat, but these were not comfortable white coats. These were heavy white coats with tons of books that I would switch through, and each rotation had a different one. What do you remember?
Well, yeah, so I definitely had some of those books, but I was hell-bent when I was going through to try and get it all in an electronic device. So I splurged as a med student. I bought one of those Palm Treo phones, which nobody else had them, or a couple people in our class, I think, had them. But, at least with that, I had Hippocrates. I had a little tool that I could, develop at least a differential diagnosis, or at least help me think of some things that I wasn't thinking of. But it was very rudimentary. I think I had to click and put every symptom that a patient had. And then it would just give me a laundry list of a differential that was frankly absurd. Did you do any of that?
Yeah, I had an early Palm Pilot, an early BlackBerry, and probably used it, but it was, at the time where that wouldn't cover everything that you needed, so you still had to have all of your books and that. We were early on, but not there.
Yeah. And then I think, more recently, I think most physicians and clinicians rely on either, UpToDate or Dynamed or, some other sort of tool like that. What are your biggest gripes about that, Dale?
Yeah, I mean, I think that at this point, using UpToDate, something like that, is the standard that we've seen. And, I've been thinking a lot about it recently, too, in the setting of, where we came from, dictation to front-end voice recognition to AI scribing, and sort of UpToDate maybe is that middle of that spectrum. And, would we ever get to a point where, you wouldn't use a tool like that and could replace that with something better? I mean, it's definitely been on my mind. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, and I know you just said a second ago that you don't know much about the guest or the product that we're going to talk about today, but you honestly, I think, just gave the best introduction. So Yair, thank you for joining us today. And we're super happy to have you on the NerdMDs podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
Welcome.
Awesome. So can we jump right in? And I mean, kind of leading off of what Dale just said, but before we jump into the details of what Avo does and is and what you want it to be, can you tell us like a bit about yourself? And, just I'll leave it open. I won't tease anybody.
Yeah, so I'm a physician, informatician from a family of a whole lot of docs. At the table on a personal side, we were always like finding veins on each other for where we could potentially put it in an IV. Not that we were, but it's like having a mom as an anesthesiologist, a dad as an endocrinologist. Like this stuff is definitely in the blood. And then I've seen a lot of sides. I was also a prior chief resident, actually at the start of COVID, in the heart of Brooklyn, helped a system transition to Epic. And from the clinical side, like I really wanted to be more efficient. I've always been a system builder. I wanted to be able to save time. Dale, kind of what you were talking about, I wanted at the time UpToDate or Dynamed or BMJ best practice, which I liked, in my EHR, auto-populating with patient data, giving me pre-drafted notes, pre-pended orders. Like I wanted efficiency to improve clinician lives, like reduce burnout, as it said, but really more wellness. I just wanted to, do what I had to do and then go back to my fam, enjoy the time that I was in the hospital or in the clinic. When I was a chief resident in Kings County Hospital in the middle of Brooklyn, I got more of an insight from the admin side. And this was after I had already started Avo. But it was like, is there a way that we can improve metrics, improve patient outcomes? It was a totally different focus, like a health system leader focus, CMO, CMIO. How do we standardize care? And it was like with more disregard to clinician wellness. It's like, well, we have to be able to improve metrics. Like we have to be able to standardize care. This is important. And, part of the journey was I met PJ, who became my co-founder. He was a doc informaticist programmer at the Columbia Informatics program when I met him. And he was building this dream of mine as a tech. And so it's like, wait a second, there's a way to actually improve clinician lives and standardize care. Like we got to do this together.
So at the time, he was already building somewhat of this concept, or was this an idea that you came up with together?
Both. So when I met him, he was like, you don't want to hear what I'm working on in the informatics program. I was doing an elective at the informatics program when I was in residency. And he was like, you got to hear what I'm doing on my nights and my weekends and what I've been building for the last 5 years. I was like, all right, you got me interested. Let's hear it. And really his concept at the time was he had a Google Sheets that he wrote a code in Swift for, at the time, just an iPhone app to be able to translate whatever you put into the Google Sheets into an app, so that you didn't need to be a programmer to be able to use it. And I was like, that's cool. I can kind of use this to take my index cards that I'd written out, my algorithms and taken pictures, and suddenly I had a Google Photos decision support system that I could share with people and my Google Drives of pre-drafted notes into an actual app, at least to start. This is, pre-EHR integration, pre-no-code builder, pre-GPT and other LLM integration. This was like in the beginning. And then together with actually another co-founder named Lawrence, we started building this up.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, anything that you want to share about your journey sort of from physician to, starting your own company, obviously that's the technical details of it, but clearly something that a lot of, your hosts right here sometimes think about, and a lot of our listeners think about, they have an idea let's just, create a product or start a company? What are some of those challenges that you didn't expect? How was that journey?
I think first of all, it's making the jump is hard. It's going in as part of the cocoon. Being a physician is the safe path. It's like, I've been in school for all this time, residency, chief residency. It's just part of the overall path. And at the time I was choosing between informatics fellowship and then grandfathering really into the informatics boards, and then not doing the fellowship, just running AVO. And to make that jump was a little bit scary. Once I made the jump, it's like my skill set as a physician, as an informatician, it really does help me bridge that gap between our tech side, clinical side, sales side, how to align stakeholders to accomplish the impossible. So we have to do in the hospital, like how do you get a patient actually discharged, where you got to do your SNF application and you don't know when you're supposed to do it. And it's not you that's doing it. It's somebody else that is not there. It's like, how do you actually do it? You got to align stakeholders. These kinds of skills do come into play. Part of the beauty is that as I spoke to people on the journey, especially in deciding and then throughout, everyone supports, doing these things. It's like, wow, you're really going to try to do it. That's great. How can I help? Like, go for it. Like, here's resources. Like, yes, I've thought about doing this also, but I haven't taken the leap. Or, one of my passions is speaking to clinicians who are stuck in clinical care and they want to be able to get out. And I can help in two ways. One is, look, the software that I'm building, it's one passion. This will help. Okay. The second is, if you want to come and join and actually help us as we're improving the system overall, use your knowledge, like do it, like take advantage of it. I will help you. I'll help you get other resources to be able to do it. Like, this is what we need to do. Take all the things that we know, take the problems that we're aware of, take our deep understanding of workflows. Like, we get it. And as clinicians, let's actually build the things that we need.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so funny because as you were just explaining that and the way you framed it and how you jumped to like starting a company, I mean, this is what Dale and I did internally inside the org that we worked together with for many years. It was like we did kind of that similar thing, but the only different, there's just a lot of parallels. We created a group of like kind of champion physicians in every department. They would bring forward the things they needed. Dale ran a program that we called Boost, which was like, kind of like department level sprints where we would literally just like build their content to allow them to fly, and just soar through specialty workflows that frankly, Dale and I didn't know, but, we had the people that could,
right,
give us that info.
You could speak both languages, like understand the clinical side, understand the IT side, and kind of bring them together. Being at that nexus is both being an informatician and also being a startup founder.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to call out too, you're the first guest we've ever had on here that actually introduced themselves as an informatician, which I'm sure half the people that are listening to this right now, they're going, what the heck is that? What do you define, or how do you define what a clinical or medical informatician is?
Yeah. So when I think about clinical informatics, I really think about being along that spread between like bioinformatics and thinking about the cell side and where it interacts from a cellular level and bio level with the IT side and digital side, and population informatics, understanding from all of the health data that's coming in across the HIEs and whatever we have, how we can understand how to help population health, to clinical informatics. How can we help individual clinicians, which can impact both, or really individual patients? Just I focus on that middle layer of individual clinicians. And the informatician is really that nexus cross between the IT side and the clinical side. And oftentimes CMIOs within health systems, so chief medical informatics or information officers, are the ones that have knowledge of both the IT side and the medical side to really help do change management. How can, as you were talking about, how can you get these programs approved within health systems that serve the needs of the clinicians and what they're asking for? and deal with the 9-month, 12-month backlog on the IT side and what actually needs to be built in a way that the IT side might not really have an understanding of the clinical side. And so how do you allow for the solutions to be built in a way that's effective? That's what the role classically has been. And then I think recently, a lot of people that have that kind of training or understanding have been moving into the startup world in order to come out of a system where you're not necessarily as bound by some of the things within the system and needing to work within it, but that you can bring in yet other stakeholders to accomplish what you need with bringing together the clinical side and the IT side.
Yeah, great definition. All right, so I want to make sure we have plenty of time to actually dive in, and I know Dale's going to probably ask you, I'll call them difficult questions, but he's going to want to know, not difficult. Yeah, he's shaking his head. But I think, Dale likes to get in the details. Like I'd say out of the two of us, he's the guy that always got real deep into like the deep build and actually figured out ways to do things in Epic, for instance, that Epic didn't know. So we introduced a couple things to Epic that they were like, well, that's an interesting way of doing things. So Dale won't share that, but I can because, I'm his friend.
And also because, Adam, because you sat in the front row with me at UGM in front of Judy.
Yeah, exactly. So let's pivot into what Avo is today and, what you guys are developing, and I think what the listeners are going to be so intrigued to know is, how Dale and I, obviously we had that banter about clinical decision support and the tools that physicians need, and the reality that nobody can memorize everything that is constantly changing. And that's going to honestly constantly be changing even more at an exponential rate as we get into genomic decisions and all sorts of other things that are going to come into play. So leading, I guess, with that comment, tell us about how Avo, accomplishes that and how it actually works so people can understand.
Yeah, you've probably heard a lot about companies that are building a digital front door for patients. Like, oh, I can access whatever I need as a patient. But we're really building a digital front door for clinicians, right? Because as a clinician, as you talked about, I don't want all these different books in my old white coat pocket, which itself is a nidus for infection that I'm bringing from room to room. I don't want more alerts or clicks in my EHR either. I want to be able to ask my EHR, for example, what I need when I need it. When did my patient start metformin? Why? When did they stop? Should they be on it now? If they told me that, a year and a half ago that they were having GI symptoms from it, well, I wouldn't just start them on it. I would ask them about the GI symptoms, tell them to wait it out 2 weeks if they want to try it again, and then come back, right? If I would restart it, it'll inform me. EHR data pulling in, but also guideline data pulling in, right? And let me take action. Draft me a note on that. Pen me orders on that. It's almost like I don't want all these tabs or alerts or books. I want Siri meets ChatGPT in the EHR. And I don't necessarily want a chatbot. That might be one way that I want to access it, but I might want to set it up as an off-the-shelf workflow. Like, this is my automatic workflow when I do pre-rounding. For me as a hospitalist, for example, when I come in to figure out what happened over the last 24 hours, instead of relying on the half sign-outs that often come in, or during the visit, I got the patient in front of me, inpatient or outpatient, set it up a workflow for me that will include conversation data, include EHR data, include, if I want, decision support from guidelines, and then allow me to produce notes and produce orders. Do it in a way that'll work for me, right? And it's different than your classic CDS tool. Your classic CDS tool is not an access point for clinicians. It's mostly an interruptive tool. And, it's oh, we improve metrics and that's great. But if you have to do more clicks as a clinician, so be it. We got to figure out how to make money as a system, and that includes metrics. Whereas we're really focused on the clinician support, improving clinician lives more than clinical decision support. We're much more of a clinician support. And I think there's 4 major parts that go into that. One part is, as we were talking about, a deep understanding of the clinician workflow. It's as the team knows, if there's something that I will use, then that means that it's worthwhile. And if we build something that I won't use, it might not be. It could be that it applies to different specialty, different setting. Okay, but if I'm using it, that's great. If all of my friends are using it, that's great. The second is I need something that I can trust. So we have 25 plus society partnerships and other trusted evidence sources. Third is I need it deeply integrated into my workflow. So I want access to all the patient data, like EHR integration, Smart on Fire, HIE, and I want it to work for me like it's part of the EHR as an activity tab inside of Epic, inside of Athena, etc. And then last but not least is like there's all these features like AI scribe and note writing. And, there's companies that are doing these one-offs, but I want them to serve my purpose. It's not like, oh, I want this tool. It's more, I want to do my work better and faster. So allow me to use all of these features in a way that can maximize value for me as a clinician and maximize value for the admin perspective for reimbursements and costs.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're speaking my language in the sense of what you're trying to solve.
As I was listening to this, I was like, "Oh man, Dale's gonna just like laugh or I don't know, come into this, like loving what you're explaining."
But I mean, that's the problem that we face as doctors. I'm a primary care doctor, so anything in the world can come in to see me, and I have to be ready to know every single condition, how to diagnose it, how to treat it. Like that's not realistic. We have to look things up. So sometimes you're on like 3 or 4 different websites trying to, get to the source of something. And then, like you said, then you got to write it down and then you got to place the order. So those pieces are a real inefficient piece of trying to take the best care of patients. Like Adam said, I'd love to understand a little bit more about, what, do you have any examples of what it actually does? I love the concepts that you kind of alluded to, but can you take us a little bit more under the hood on what it actually does and what it doesn't do?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's 2 ways to answer that. One is to talk about the technical side and how it works. The other is to give you more of a clinical side. So I'll start with the clinical side, and then I can kind of compare to other solutions that are out there to help guide it. And then we could go more under the hood.
That'd be great.
On a clinical side, I'm a hospitalist. I do per diem shifts at Mount Sinai. A lot of times I used to have clinical questions like, I've got a patient who's got a hemoglobin A1C of 10 and an eGFR of 23, and they're on DPP-4s and they're on metformin. And they're coming in and their hemoglobin A1C is still high, and they come to the ER with a glucose of 750. What do I do? It's like, I don't know. It's okay. Let's just see. Oh man, like let me search. Okay. Diabetes care. Let me double check my DKA article. Let me double check the HHS article, make sure it's not DKA or HHS, double check the diabetes, right? It's like, I got to go into 5 or 6 different articles just to figure out, make sure that I have my diagnostics correct, ensure that I went through the differential, then medication management. Like how am I changing the medications? What do I do for acute care? How do I set them up appropriately? Chronic care. Then I need to draft this into a note because I'm doing an admission. Then I need to take care of my 9 other admissions and deal with the emergencies that are coming in, all while keeping a straight head, right? So if there were some way that I can have this imported with patient context into a tab in my EHR, so it knows the patient's history, it knows their labs, it knows what drugs they're on, and then I have a clinical question, which is, give me a DDX. Here's your answer for DDX. Cool. Next steps to differentiate between the top 3 and the DDX. Here's your top 3. Place those orders for me. Here's your pended orders. Put that into a draft note so that I can supplement my ER timeline as I continue. Here's your pended note. Great. What medications should I be starting for this patient? Well, SGLT2s is a better idea than DPP-4s, and they can't be used together. Metformin is inappropriate because eGFR is less than 30, right? It's like, how can I speak so clearly about this? Because I had a patient like this, and I went through it. And so it made it clear to me, right? In a way that's like, all of these things are source traceable, so I can understand where it comes from, tied to my patient, so I can understand that it is related to my patient context, and then allows me to really function in a way that's so much more efficient, but also I learn, right? So I'm continually improving as a doc, that suddenly I can tell you this, in the context of a convo that was, I didn't expect this question, right? And it's just like, yeah, I had a patient on this recently, like I got you, in a way that I can now, if I have this patient, I probably won't need to check it, but I might want it to still pre-draft my notes, in which case I might not use the chatbot. I might use my automated workflow. And the automated workflow can be, let's say, an H&P maker, where instead of going through this chatbot, I would just use my phone as a device, and similar to the AI scribes that you're used to, we can have a recording. I'll say to the patient, hey, I use my phone to record the conversation to turn into a note. Cool with you? Cool, great. Go for it. As I'm walking away, I probably might dictate 1 or 2 things additional into it, which is perfectly fine because it can understand both across different languages as well. So, AI scribe companies do this, but then I want to turn that into a note, which means I need EHR context to be pulled into it because it's a known patient who's had all of these different problems. I might want decision support on it. So I can say, look, for this conversation that I have, or for this patient, like I'm really trying to figure out the differential for that new cough that they have. I haven't gotten that. Can you help me? And so I might use the chat function as part of that automated workflow and create the notes that are there, but then also use this the different constructs. And then ultimately it's like, look, this is the stuff that I'm doing as a clinician. There's other parts too, right? So this is like me as a hospitalist, how do I personally get the most benefit from it? But it can work in different areas. So I think one thing in particular to highlight is that every health system has different needs, right? So I talked about like my own personal workflow, which is really how I personally relate most to it. But it's like, every different clinical group has, we're really trying to improve COPD care for respiratory and crossing between these. And we want to have some solution that can do it. And so they want to be able to build that, but in a way that doesn't burden IT. So how do you work that into these workflows? We have a back-end builder that's a no-code, customizable from the clinical side that allows for the construction of these unique workflows and ways that it can actually fit in here so that you can improve these specific aims for whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. So yes, take the stuff off the shelf like I just described, or use some of these things that are more tailored to what you want.
And are those tailored workflows something that me as a user, I can make my own, sort of workflows, or me as a system, or is that something that you provide, based on what people request? That's one of your new workflows people can use. How does that work? I didn't understand.
Yes, and yes. So from a technical capability, it can be used by anyone. We have a service arm that's able to help systems construct it because there is no pure SaaS in health systems. And then a lot of our systems over the course of the first year choose to take autonomy of the back-end builder so they can continue to construct what they want. And we've actually had IT systems that brought us to health systems that are like, hey, this is what we want because it'll save us as the IT side, which is interesting because oftentimes it's from the clinical side.
Okay, so there's the chatbot, there's the workflows, and the ability to help write the notes and queue up the orders. Am I getting it right?
Yeah. There's a couple different aspects. So like in a pre-visit workflow for ambulatory, like take Neighbor Health is one of our customers. I think they're the largest FQHC in Boston. And so as they're going through the pre-visit in order to set up the room, it's like if the patient's coming in saying, hey, I've got a rash, it'll be set up for rash. But if it's able to take in the patient data and run through the workflow as a pre-visit, which understands that the patient's diabetes is out of whack, their hypertension's out of whack, they've got NAFL that we need to address, it'll set it up appropriately for them, compare to the guidelines, characterize the patient, match across the guidelines, give you a care guide of what you might want to do in the visit, pre-draft a note if you want, run calculators automatically if you want. So we have a library of calculators, which can then take in the patient data and run those calculators, right? These are different kinds of tools that you can set, each to achieve different aims.
Yeah, and I think one thing too that's probably worth mentioning too, Yair, that you haven't like specifically said, you sort of softly said, was these systems have the ability to use their own proprietary guidelines to drive this too. And so, I mean, I was fortunate enough to talk to one of your customers, I was helping out an investment group that was looking to invest. And so I was doing a little bit of diligence with them. And what I was struck by was, this nephrology group that's using it. And I thought when I talked to them, they were going to be telling me how, their nephrologists were using it for X, Y, and Z. And they were like, no, we use it for our actual like dietitians who, they have this. I mean, you can probably speak to this more, but I mean, what caught me was they have these proprietary dietary, guidelines for these complicated nephrology patients. And dietitians are very smart with that stuff, but like they need to be able to do more and be able to, write up those plans quicker. And so they were able to use their proprietary stuff as a framework that allows them to basically do 4 times more than what they could without it. So I don't know, maybe I feel like I'm selling your company, but I think I was just struck by that conversation because that's like what people need. I mean, they need something that accelerates the human, but like not in a rushed, crazy way.
Yeah, I mean, we our formal name is Avo MD, but if you'll see on my hat, it's Avo colloquially, and that's because we really service clinicians, not just docs, right? Not just providers, and doing it in a way that can fit into their respective workflows, which I might not even understand, but is enabled through the builder. And so that's like a key aspect of it. There's other key aspects, right? It's like, as you think about your standard clinical decision support system, like oftentimes it's not seamless, even if it is in the EHR, like alerts or whatever. And it's like, well, you want the ability to like take in discrete data and then maybe even non-discrete data and turn it into discrete data using our data extractor in the builder, and then run that against a concrete rule-based decision support algorithm so that you know that you can trust it, assuming that the data that comes in is trustable, and set it up in a way that you can trust. Like, maybe you trust if the patient has a heart failure diagnosis, if they've been seen by primary care within the last 6 months, you can now set that up, right? So that you have your even non-discrete data or discrete mixed with non-discrete data into a format that you can trust. And some of these things are like set up by systems because they want it in the way that they want it. A lot of the others are off the shelf, ready to rock. There's not every system has the resources to say, look, I'm going to build this out in the way that matches specifically exactly what we want. They'll use some of our off the shelf products.
No, very cool. I mean, and honestly, what we just kind of pivoted in is usually the next section that we get into, where we kind of try to go under the hood a little more with these. And obviously, we don't want you to share anything that you feel would make it. Others could have some sort of advantage or competitive advantage to replicate what you're doing. But can you, we talked a lot about the clinical piece and a bit of this like back-end builder piece, which is great for the end users. But like, can you talk a little bit about kind of like some of the technical details of like how this is actually working, and I think you mentioned this, but I think it's worth repeating to everyone that this is actually happening kind of like in the EHR itself, so you're not switching to a web browser, you're not switching to another screen. It's a tab in the EHR, which we're used to switching tabs. And so, yeah, I'd love for you to share how that kind of works in that way.
Yeah. So let me frame it and then go into more detail. Like, if you think about your incumbent quote clinical decision support, like you might think of UpToDate, which is trusted, but not in the EHR, or Clinical Key, not in the EHR, not well integrated into the EHR, even if it's integrated into our personal workflows, right? It's not integrated into the way that we would optimally want. And then on the totally opposite side of the spectrum is like, every day people text me about a new AI tool and they're like, hey, have you seen this? Hey, have you seen that? And it's like, nope, I haven't seen all of them. And a lot of these are like GPT built, non-EHR integrated, not necessarily trustable. And if you do try to integrate it into the EHR, they're like one-off tools that are overwhelming, can take a long time to implement in Epic. It's not like a platform that's going to come together. And so part of it is thinking about a solution that'll work for the IT side, where it's a single install that then allows for the implementation of these various products across workflows that can then service the clinicians without undue burden on the IT side. That's from the health system perspective. As you dive deeper under the hood to like understand from an AI perspective, right? So Dale, you were asking me before about an example, and to give you another example, let's say or we'll use the same one, right? So I have this patient, I'm saying, hey, they've got a new cough, give me a differential diagnosis for this. Okay. We've already implemented Strawberry model into part of what we can do. And it is not solely that, because we use something called mixture of agents. Mixture of agents means that you're running a large language model agent, and then you're running another, and there's like branches that can come off that direct different ones what to run. And the reason that we do it is because if you're asking for a differential, it'll go down one path. If you're asking for management, it'll go down another path. If you're asking for writing a note, it's something else, right? And each of these different parts can call up whatever is specifically here. So something that requires deeper reasoning can run through specific paths. So as an example, if I'm asking for this differential, it'll go down a differential path. If I'm asking for management, it'll go through our library of guidelines, and then it'll pick out, well, here's the appropriate guideline to answer this appropriate query. Let's pull that in. Just use that through our modified version that's similar to retrieval augmented generation, but more accurate. And then it can pull in, okay, we've retrieved this as our knowledge source. Here it is. And if you want to source it, well, where are the quotations that tie directly into where it's coming from so that I can see in the source material where it comes from? But it's like through this mixture of agents that it really goes through. From a clinical perspective, right, for me, so it's like IT perspective, make it as simple as possible. AI perspective, make it as simple as possible. From a clinical perspective, also make it as simple as possible. This idea of like, how do I have something intuitive, something that's just a digital front door that I can go to for whatever I need and have it fit into my workflows in a way that works for me. And then, of course, make it adaptable so that it's like, you know, a platform is judged by its use cases. You were talking about the dialysis clinic. Like we could talk about small clinics, large Epic Health systems, peds, urgent care, dialysis centers, and so on. And it's like product perspective, yeah, sure, focus on specific areas. But platform perspective, as you're building, make it so easy, even from the platform side, that can be judged by its use cases.
Yeah, I'm curious. You talk about, you know, all the different models where it can be used, and I was kind of, my head was going there as well, thinking about, you know, what has been some of your best like ROI cases that you've demonstrated, and you know, who should be listening and thinking of themselves as the ideal fit for one of these use cases? Because I mean, unfortunately, we can't just have the best products for, you know, making the physicians' days better, even though that's something that I'm passionate about. And, you know, we do, you know, get opportunities to do that, but it always helps to have an ROI.
Yeah. So across our sites, we showed over 50% of time saving at the point of care, which obviously translates into concrete ROI, showed a 36% improvement in admission delays, have a 97% clinician satisfaction rate. To drill down into some of the like specific use cases, I got permission from PM Pediatric Care to share some of the data that they came back with. So they are the nation's largest provider of specialized pediatric urgent care across 14 states. And they wanted to standardize their care, standardize their formulary, have APPs and clinician support staff use it. They partnered with AVO. They found AVO used about 39,000 times across their staff within a year of implementation. They found that they could actually upskill their clinical support staff and reduce costs. So they showed a 54% increase in medical assistant medication administration, which allowed for physicians to reduce their time on this task by 31%, meaning physicians can actually focus on patient assessment, diagnosis, treatment, and that shift reduced staffing cost associated with med administration by 71%. So like these numbers, right, as they come in, are hard, concrete financial dollars across the spectrum.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. I don't know if we lost Dale or he's frozen or if he's still on mute. But thank you for sharing that. I mean, because I think we were going to ask kind of like more into the details, like what evidence, because I think, yeah, these tools, and especially the way you're explaining it, I mean, I don't think there's a clinician that's listening that's not saying, I would love to have that, you know, but I think the challenges in health systems is like, you know, unless the system is truly just trying to find something that's going to like better the lives of the physicians, like give back that kind of wellness piece, like you said, that can be an ROI. Because I mean, man, you lose a physician, like they leave an organization, it's very costly. So there is that downstream, but you know, I think typically the systems really want to see those numbers like you just shared. Which is pretty impressive. One thing before we like pivot to kind of, you know, the fun kind of nerd alert round, I did want, you know, I think I asked you this question before when we were chatting, where you were kind of alluding to that you guys have actually kind of found a way to integrate this tool kind of deeper into the physician workflow of the EHR. So like specifically, you know, the different kind of like smart links that you can bring in. Like you were talking about how there's some outputs of AVO when it's integrated that can tie into, like, say you're using Epic or Athena that has a dot phrase or a macro or something, like to pull that kind of some of that content into the note as well. So like using almost like a hybrid of, you know, a drafted kind of note and then also being able to pull in kind of more discrete pieces out of AVO. Am I getting that right? Yeah,
definitely. So I always like to talk in terms of use cases. So in one of our inpatient settings, the question was, look, we're already using you guys. We have our clinicians that are using your synopsis and care guide before they see patients as their pre-rounding workflow in the morning. is there any chance that as they go through that, you can also automatically do CDI and automatically check if there is any documentation improvement that's needed? And instead of prompting the physician to go put it into their notes, just put it as part of a dot phrase so that before they sign their note, they can just read it through, but there's nothing else that they need to do. Any chance you guys can do that? And the answer is yes, right? It's like, we can do that also, of course. Like, you can build out the CDI components, and we might have that as something that we'll offer off the shelf too. Stay tuned. But now we have this one system that's including it as something that is present within their system for the clinicians that are going through this in a way that doesn't take any more burden on me, but allows for the system to make more revenue because of these features that we have for the deep EHR integration. As you talk about producing just a note, it's like, as I'm writing my notes, there's some parts of a template that I prefer to have rather than just the voice. It's like I'm a super user in Epic. I helped stand up, some of the Epic system when we were doing the transition in Kings County across health and hospitals to Epic. So note templates, order sets, like I've built this stuff, and it's like, I have all of my like macros that are basically set up. So I don't want something that's just going to produce a note with my conversation data and ignore the rest of that. So how do I combine these? This allows me to actually combine it.
Got it. No, that's cool. Dale, do you have a follow-up question to any of that make you think of anything?
No, I mean, I think you shared sort of a little bit on the future direction. I don't know, what, like Adam said before, what you're willing to share or not, but like, obviously you're kind of at the cutting edge of this about what's possible, using all the new models. Is there anything that you can share on the long-term strategic direction that you think that maybe not AVO is going to go, or maybe AVO is going to go, but predictions for the future of healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, from the AVO perspective, we set everything up in a way that's modular. It's like we have an OpenAI BAA, we have a zero retention agreement with them, so we're able to use their models through this mixture of agents. We also have an agreement with Gemini. We also can use Llama. We also have a BAA with Azure, right? It's like we're not choosing favorites. We just happen to be using the one that works the best for us for now. And so part of it is setting us up to be future-proof. We are not doing our own LLM. Like, I don't think that that's future-proof. We will never have enough money to compete with OpenAI, and I don't want to. I'd rather be able to use the best model as part of what we're doing. So I think from an architecture framework, that's like for sure the way that it's going to end up coalescing across some of these like larger architectures or LLMs. From where's the world going to go? Like, I'm excited for this to be opened up for patients at some point. I think the regulatory landscape needs to evolve a lot more than it has in order for us to even try and go there. I think also we have to trust it more. Like, I think back to Tesla drives, and it's like, if you think that you can trust full self-drive now, and then you try to take an exit and you realize, like, you can't trust it now. Maybe you can in the future, but like, there's a human in the loop for a reason, and thinking much more about, well, how do we make our processes more efficient? Make the human in the loop, have the human be back in the loop, right? Like, put the human back into clinical care and allow for achieving all the things that the buyers need to happen. That's really how to make these things progress. So I think, as more people realize, like, this is really what you have to do. It's not such a focus on, we can actually automate everything for patient side. And, this is going to happen now. Like, let's be realistic of how this can progress, help inform, like, be a part of it as clinicians, as physicians, so that we can actually help guide the way that it should work. I think we'll start to see more companies that are coming to the forefront that have clinician and physician leaders and leadership, because they understand, multiple parts of how it works. And then from a technology perspective, see it really helping clinicians first and foremost, and then eventually with regulatory change, moving into the patient side too, which is exciting.
Yeah, love to hear that. I'll hand it over to Adam to get the lightning round kicked off. Adam?
Yeah. So obviously, fun conversation. I mean, I think the three of us have all, been living this kind of life, and you've just kind of taken the reins and, really kind of put together this company with your co-founders, which, kudos to you. So let's just shift to having some fun for the rest of this. And we'll give you like a chance at the very end to like make any final thoughts that you'd like to say. But Dale and I are just going to ping pong some fun questions to you. If you don't like them, you can pass. There's no penalty. There's no prize for your answer. So Dale, you want to hit them with the first one?
Yeah, sure. So what is the most adventurous thing you've ever done?
I was a digital nomad with my wife. After we were married for about a year, we just put our stuff in storage and traveled for about 6 months. Part of it was a conference trail. A lot of it was international. And that was pretty wild.
Pretty wild.
No, that's good. I thought you were going to say start a company shortly after.
Nah.
That would have been too cliche, right? All right. So second one, we always like to ask a food question. So if there was only one food, if there's only one food that you could eat for the rest of your life, what would that be?
So to answer one food, it's going to have to be pizza topped with avocados. That way I can slip in both. Pizza was my staple for life. I attributed my growth spurt to pizza. Pizza allowed me to sleep. Pizza allowed me to be awake. But then avocados became my love a little bit later in life. That was like college into med school and then especially into residency. You might notice that Avo has a green logo that is for specific reasons, even though it's pronounced Avo. But yeah, pizza and avocados are my two. So if it's got to be one, I'll put them together.
Do you actually put an avocado on a pizza?
I have.
Before cooking or after? I'm like intrigued.
Yeah, you'd raw avocados, chop them up into squares, put them on the pizza, put on some sriracha on top. You're good to go.
Sounds amazing. All right, Dale. Ping pong back.
At first, I just thought you were trying to cheat the system and steal some avocados for your question, but you do eat it together, so that's interesting. Total pivot to the next question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Eating pizza with avocados. No, I'm just kidding. It's take advantage of it.
I think we received that advice.
It's similar. It's, take advantage of opportunities that come your way. It's like, you don't need to be stressed and active to go find all the opportunities. There are many that will come streaming by the river, and like, be on the lookout for them and then take them.
It's good advice.
Good advice.
I love that. All right. So this is a little bit about is to find out about you if you like the past or think about the future more. So if you could time travel, where would you go and why?
I've thought about this a bunch, and throughout my life, I have different answers. My current answer is I would want to be a part of the Israelites leaving Egypt. I could just imagine that being such a high after being like constrained for so long, and it's like literally going from slavery to freedom, seeing a sea split. Like, can you imagine actually being there as part of it? Like, that would be wild. So yeah, if I could take a little time travel, I'd be there for that moment.
That's cool. Is that like, so when you, I guess the answer you led with, when you were a kid, would you have answered that like you'd want to go into the future more, or was there a different?
Yeah, probably future more. Like as a kid, I wanted to like, honestly, a lot of the systems that are coming out now, it's like stuff that I dreamed about as a kid. I think the other one is like being able to sort of like control movement while not touching something. So just with like thought, which hasn't quite come yet, but it's basically there. That was more of the kid version. And now I think as I've progressed a little bit, I look more to the past to help define the future.
Yeah, good advice.
All right, next up, we're on Zoom right now, so I actually have no idea where you live, but this question is the favorite thing about the city that you live in. I guess tell us what this city is. So
in the immediate moment, subject to change, but immediate moment, I live in Long Beach, New York. And the thing that I love about here is being so close to the beach. So I am a surfer and a swimmer, one of the reasons that I wanted to be more efficient in the hospital. And I love being able to go out to the ocean, especially at sunrise, and just, look up as like the clouds are illuminated in different colors, and as the sun comes up, and then catch a couple waves and, to work before anybody's even woken up yet.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny, I grew up on the West Coast. So for me, it was always going to the beach at sunset. And so I think we actually probably like the same thing, but it just depends on what side of the country you live on.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. And Dale's from out there on the East Coast as well.
One of you on the pizza side, one on the avocado side.
Exactly. You've brought the two sides together. Like, that's amazing. Actually, everyone eats avocados now.
That's an informatician.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It's the matrix between those two amazing food groups. But I actually like Chicago pizza. So sorry, guys. Anyway, we don't have to get into a pizza fight. All right. This last one is kind of like the classic question, which I know is somewhat cliche, but we like to ask it periodically. But, you know, if you could sit and have dinner with someone, dead or alive, who would that be, and kind of why would you do it?
It's my wife. And the reason why is startup founder life is taxing. I still do about a clinical shift per month on average. And there is a lot of priorities in my life. But the ability to cherish and prioritize the important moments, the important people, is definitely a priority for me. And so it's awesome anytime we're able to sneak in those dinners together, which is not every night, and be able to have that quality time.
That's awesome. I hope she's listening to this episode. I don't know if she listens to podcasts that you're guests on.
I don't know either. I don't know either. So that's all right. As long as we get dinner, together, that works.
Exactly.
We hope she's listening. We hope she gives us 5 stars for that.
Yeah, we do want 5-star review on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever would be great. No, but my wife actually listens to most of our episodes. Sometimes she gets behind, but when she listens, and she'll always comment randomly like about something, and I know she'll comment about this when she listens to it at some point. Well, Yair, thank you very much for taking time. I know it's much later on the East Coast right now than it is for us in the Middle Coast, like I like to say, in the mountain region. But do you have any final comments or anything else that you feel like you wish you would have said that you didn't, to wrap things up?
I would just say, for the clinicians in clinical care, help build the system, because we need you to.
Solid advice. That's kind of something that I live by, including this dog that wants me to pet him every moment, right at the end of the show. But no, thank you for joining us. Wish you good success, and we wish you a good week.
Thank you so much.
Guys.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for listening to Efficiency Unlocked, Nerd Tested, MD Approved, a Nerd MD's podcast by Drs. Adam Carewe and Dale Gold.